Hello, and welcome to episode 47 of the Anexinet Infrastructure Modernization Podcast. My name is Chris Hayner, and I'm an enterprise architect in the infrastructure space here at Anexinet. Here on AIM, we invite industry professionals and subject matter experts to talk about topics that will help organizations take the next step on their IT infrastructure modernization journey. With me today to discuss the evolving world of enterprise storage are Mike Monahon, HPE Technical Architect, Mid-Atlantic Region, specializing in storage, compute, and DC networking. How you doing, Mike?
Doing great, Chris. Thanks for having me here today.
And also joining me is Vic Simon, Infrastructure Pre-Sales Architect with us here at Anexinet. How's it going, Vic?
Good, Chris. Thanks for having me.
So we wanted to get started, and this is obviously a very large topic. So, Mike, let's start with a little history and where we were and where we are now.
Yeah, so part of this, Chris, was obviously talking about the HPE vision. So going back probably almost 5 years ago, our current CEO at the time, Meg Whitman, and our current CEO, Antonio Neri, kind of developed a direction of where the company was heading. And looking at the industry with manufacturing and our partners, we realized that the industry needed to become more hybrid, right? So we're driving towards this world of hybrid IT. And looking at this next generation of compute, we knew that we needed to make sure the world could support this cloud ready, right? So we kind of looked at three pillars of where the market was at HPE. And the first one being making the world hybrid and making it simple. So hybrid IT, we need to be able to accelerate the right mix of IT, whether it's on-prem or off-prem, as well as deliver product and create more of a digital world out at the edge.
So really, when you say hybrid IT, that's exactly what you mean. Your IT could be in the cloud, could be on-prem, you could share the space.
Correct. Look at the public cloud providers today, like AWS and Azure and Google. They've all implemented on-prem type solutions. So they know public cloud isn't the answer for everything. It's finding the right mix, what can go to the public cloud and what still needs to remain on site. So we've realized that, again, almost 5 years ago. And the nice part was we knew there was a world of digital transformation happening around us. So we've been able to push a lot more of this stuff out to the edge. And a big part of that on the other side is obviously having the expertise to deliver on this. So I'll let Vic talk a little bit about delivering on some of those services, because that's what's been a huge part of this digital transformation.
Yeah, Mike. So to your point, with infrastructure becoming a hybrid model and workloads living in both the public cloud and on-prem, it's been realized that, enterprise class servers, storage, and networking aren't going away anytime soon.
So part of this is we've seen a big transition, right? I remember when I was an IT director, a lot of the times my boss would come to me and say, how are we going to reduce costs this year by 10%, 20%, right? So IT data centers were looked at as cost centers. And we realized that in today's world, they're not cost centers as much, right? We know they have to become more of a revenue generator. So a lot of the terminologies we look at is this world of bimodal, right? There's a bimodal data center. What can we transition as that traditional data center? And what do we need to move into more of this world of hybrid IT? Your competitors, your peers, the rest of the world are facing these same transitions. I often talk about disruption in the market today, and I'll say to a customer, if you go back 3 years ago, who disrupted the taxi company?
That'd be Uber and Lyft.
Right? And who disrupted the real estate market?
Airbnb.
Right? And what did they really invent? They didn't invent anything. They took advantage of this ideal economy, and they were able to use things at scale, right? They were able to use hybrid IT, right, in the cloud. They swipe a credit card, spin up some VMs. Now, that's a huge amount of disruption. If you look at the IT market today, most IT industry feel that 25% has already been disrupted, and there's a large amount is going to be disrupted around them.
Right. And when you were talking earlier about the ways that you can make IT not so much of a cost sink. There are some simple ideas in the enterprise storage area that already are probably pretty familiar with people. Instead of old style SANs that were just a bunch of disks that were used or unused, whatever it was there. Now you can do storage pools that are more dynamic. You can enlarge in and then small in, to use technical terms. Yep. These are concepts that people already know from projects that already exist, but you're talking about something completely different.
Yeah, and in a minute, we'll talk about what we've coined kind of the world of intelligent storage and what really is driving the market today. There's a lot of key words out there like AI, machine learning, inference, and everything else that's driving this big data AI push, right? So we'll dive into what we feel as HPE, what really determines that and how we're driving towards that world. But I think more importantly, as we were talking about before, we knew that we needed to transition as a company. So who's HPE today? And we realized by doing some spin mergers and splitting off some less data center focused, I'll say. So we wanted to become more laser focused on the data center. It made us more cash heavy, which we know in today's world is huge, right? Antonio Neri, our CEO, said last year or 2 years ago almost now that we were going to spend more than $4 to $5 billion in R&D. Again, that's pretty uncommon in today's world where some of our competitors are so over leveraged, they're hardly spending anything in R&D. They're just trying to pay off the heavy loans that they're maintaining. So what Antonio's vision was, there were kind of some key areas that we were going to look at on how we would transform HPE into today's focus to help support this hybrid IoT type world. First was organic investments. So we looked at, from the IoT side, was the edge, right? We knew Edgeline was a big part of this. So we have a solution of products that help answer the edge. We also focus heavily on the WAN campus branch and went out and bought Aruba, right? Aruba's been a huge acquisition for HPE, allowing us to be able to expand to that IoT world. And then we looked at some other key organic investments internally with taking Blades into the Synergy world, which is our 2.0 Blades technology, and then coming out with a management solution that overlays all this with OneView. So that's been some key factors in our organic investments. But then we also targeted some key acquisitions. And I think some of the bigger ones to me were propelling us in the HCI space, which we know was growing. We went out and bought SimpliVity, which is an HCI solution. We also went out and bought Cray and SGI, which gave us probably 75% of the market share in the HPC space. So that's been a great acquisition of ours, as well as probably the biggest gem, Nimble, right? Nimble Storage, not only bringing the storage portfolio in-house, but also bringing that AI ops, right? Having the intelligence with InfoSight.
Well, and to sort of tail on to that, Mike, one of the best things that I've seen come out of HPE in a while is the proliferation of InfoSight across so many of the different product lines across HP. So InfoSight, while originally was just for advanced analytics and AI problem resolution for storage, it's actually morphed, and it now encompasses everything from the DL line and Apollos to 3PARs and what we'll talk about in a little bit here, but also with Primera, the next generation of storage arrays.
Correct. Yeah, and that's one of the visions, and we'll definitely go deeper into this, as Vic was just talking about, is kind of we're building towards this autonomous data center. Taking this platform, which Nimble has kind of given us probably a decade jump across a lot of the competition, because it's one thing to have a ton of data, right? We all collect data. More importantly is, what do you do with the data? And that's what Nimble brought to the table with InfoSight. So as Vic said, we've been able to take that data, take the learning that Nimble had, and then kind of spread that across the entire data center. And we're looking to make this more of an autonomous data center conversation. The last big piece of what we visioned was, we know we're not going to have the best of breed in every product in every category. So what we've really depended on was providing strategic partnerships. And what you'll see is a lot of our strategic partnerships were around things like Microsoft Azure, obviously looking at Mesosphere, and other partners like Docker have allowed us to extend. And then obviously some key relationships with like Commvault and Veeam allow us to provide a total solution to our customers, not just a bunch of point products.
Yeah, so Vic, when you're talking to customers, depending on what their needs are, there's something in here for everybody, basically.
Oh, absolutely. HPE has probably one of the broadest portfolios of cutting-edge technology that really helps our customers not just throw new gear on the floor, but actually affect and be change agents for business outcomes.
Yeah, so as Vic said, what we're seeing, what are real customers' requirements today? And things have changed. If you look at some of the industry standards and what's driving this digital transformation era in storage, it's modernization. Studies show by this year, more than 50% of spend comes directly from the lines of business. So to what we've kind of coined that term is shadow IT. And we know the IT departments today are being challenged. I was talking to a partner the other day, and he was telling me that he was at a customer site, and the customer actually told them that they weren't aware one of their lines of business had spun up over 25,000 VMs in the cloud, and they weren't even aware of this happening. So there's obviously a lot of concerns from IT because they're losing control of data. Obviously, there's a lot of security concerns, and then there's an ongoing cost, right? We know cost continues to grow in this hybrid world.
Yeah, and Mike, one of the other things to keep in mind here also is that realistically in the storage industry, there really hasn't been an innovative change in probably the last decade. Really, the last big thing to hit storage arrays, traditional SANs, is the implementation of flash, the all-flash drive, and more importantly, the all-flash array. But at the end of the day, it's still running SCSI protocols over the back end, which is decades old. And with Primera specifically, while it's still running the SAS and the SCSI as the arrays are, it's been architected and primed to be ready for that next generation or evolution of storage.
One of the big things I look at is this digital transformation that we're seeing, and as Vic just talked about, right? The big change in IT and what we've seen from surveys from like ESG and some other ones, over the past 2 years, IT professionals are saying more than 75% say that complexity of their environments have gotten so much tougher. It's more complex now than it's been in the past. So we know flash has helped to mask a lot of the problems, and ESG came out with a study saying probably almost 90% of the arrays this year will be flash optimized. But there are some gaps there. And Vic started talking about there's some substantial protocol changes that need to happen in the industry, right? SCSI, SAS, all that has been around for a long time. One of the big pushes and big changes is something that's called NVMe. And it's not drives, it's a substantial protocol change. So Vic, what does NVMe really mean to the industry today?
So as of right now, NVMe still hasn't really been adopted as a widespread standard protocol. However, when you go out and you start talking to customers, other vendors out there have started positioning NVMe in their arrays. The funny thing about that is that an SSD drive and an NVMe drive are actually sharing the same chips on the actual drive itself. So when you're talking NVMe, it's really an SSD drive running over an optimized protocol called NVMe.
And so that point, until we have a true end-to-end solution, as Vic was saying, until NVMe is ratified across the entire stack from the server through the network to the storage, it's really not a huge benefit to have an NVMe drive in your storage array until you can have an end-to-end solution. So we're working as HPE, and we realize this, right? There's a lot of requirements from the HBA or the NIC port itself, and then the drivers all the way up through the networking. Now, the other big issue that a lot of our customers are faced with today is how do they deal with this digital transformation? And what they really are seeing is there's probably two pillars that they can choose. One, move their data to the cloud, or the other is they need to be able to operate like a cloud. And like I said earlier, we can't depend on taking weeks or months to procure, rack, stack, configure, and deliver to our end users or lines of business. They want turnaround in less than an hour or two.
And realistically, most environments are going to be a combination of the two. So some workloads will move to the cloud. Other workloads like ERP and patient confidential information or legal documentation or things of that nature are going to stay on-prem.
So you're talking about, the old story was virtual machines. You could spin up a virtual machine in 45 minutes instead of 2 weeks by ordering something from the store and waiting for it to arrive. You're talking about taking that concept and abstracting it even further.
If you can't move to the cloud, you need to act like a cloud. And the days of procuring and racking and stacking, that doesn't work for a lot of these customers. Because like I said earlier, we had one customer who had 25,000 VMs in the cloud because their IT department couldn't deliver on that agility and velocity that they needed, right? So we realized that this is an area of concern for IT. You don't want to create this shadow IT. You want to control your security. You obviously want to control the data. So there are ways we can help you achieve that through the next piece of this intelligent storage, right? And what we look at as HPE, what really truly unlocks the potential of intelligent storage. And one of the big parts I always talk to Vic about is AI ops, right? We talk about AI ops, and Vic brought up some of it earlier around InfoSight. So we'll dig into that, what's driving this AI world. Another part is we've been talking about the whole time, right? We need to be cloud ready. When we start looking at products, we need to build for the cloud. Again, whether it's public cloud, whether it's hybrid cloud, you have to have those on-ramps to reach there. Back in the day, there was these huge impacts of after I went through my 3-year support costs would go up by 60%, 80%. why was the industry like NetApp and EMC and everybody else in those days? What were they trying to accomplish by driving up these huge costs?
Yeah, so basically it was a way to force customers into procuring the latest and greatest hardware, where if the new hardware was cheaper than a support renewal, it was a no-brainer to buy the new hardware that came with 3 years of maintenance. With the evolution of technology moving as fast as it is, you can't be upgrading or updating, forklift upgrading your systems every 6 months to 12 months. So with the as a service model, you don't have to worry about that as much.
Yep. And as Vic said, we've all been in the industry for a long time. And I remember I used to have customers back in those days. They would be on a 3-year buy cycle, and they had so many different arrays. By the time they finished migrating the first set of arrays, the 3 years had passed, they would start over. So they would migrate the first set. By the year 3, they were starting over with the set that they did 3 years ago. So it was an endless cycle.
It was definitely a full-time job. Yeah. Absolutely.
And we all realize today, the days of having, and not entirely across the industry, but there aren't the days of having experts or specialists in one area anymore, right? When we look at customers today, a lot of people are generalists, right? They wear so many different hats out there in the world today. They have to be the network guy, the server guy, the storage guy, the hypervisor guy. There is no days of I just focus on one line, one product line anymore. So what we've realized is that's where things have to become more intelligent. And that's what's driving the world of AI ops, also driving the world of things like HCI to help us become more efficient in what we're doing out there in the world today.
Can you give a practical example of that? Like what does an environment look like before and after you implement something that uses AI ops like you're talking about?
Yeah, so a lot, like I was saying before, a lot of things we've seen. So what InfoSight, for example, has brought to the table is we're not just monitoring the storage rates. It's not, think of it like an iceberg. We're not just monitoring the tip. It's not just some pretty dashboards alerting us something failed. It's everything below the surface that you don't look at. So when we look at something like an InfoSight, for example, we're monitoring entire communities or peer-to-peer, if you want to say. And one of the examples I always use, like Waze, right? When you're driving somewhere, if there's an accident up ahead, Waze will pop up because it's a peer-to-peer conversation. People ahead of you are saying, hey, there's an accident. Waze will automatically give you predictive analytics to say, I have a faster route. Do you want to take this route? Yes or no?
Right.
So it's pre-alerting you to issues and then giving you options on what to do. So that's what you'll see when we start talking about things like InfoSight with AI intelligence. It's not just identifying there's a problem. It's also helping you resolve that problem. Or in a lot of cases, we see over 85% of those problems automatically resolved before you're even aware that there was an issue.
But more to the point, you take advantage of other people's problems essentially.
You do.
Okay, it's just a reality of life. So no one likes to be patient zero. However, if you are patient zero, that information is anomalized and then shared with the rest of the community and creates what's called blacklists inside of InfoSight. So if you have a driver combination that causes a problem, or there's a mandatory patch that doesn't jive well with another driver, InfoSight is smart enough to say, hey, I've seen this before. I'm going to let the rest of the InfoSight community know that this is out there. And if you have an environment that matches those particulars, then I'm going to, at minimum, warn you about it and possibly even block you from doing that.
Yep. So this is much bigger than just AI taking a look at your entire environment. This is AI looking at the entire outlay of these types of systems and informing everybody.
One of the things we started talking about was intelligent storage, right? And what's driving this data platform of intelligent storage. Today, it's more about workloads and how do we address certain workloads. So we kind of break it up in a couple different categories. What does it mean to your business? Is it something like a mission critical workload? And how does that impact if you're down? Like, example, that would be healthcare. If their systems go down in the middle of an operation, that could cost someone their life.
Right.
Or in the financial sector, they're losing, if God forbid, if their systems go down, they're losing millions of dollars a minute or a second even, right? So I was at a casino the other day. We were designing a HA stretch cluster across multiple data centers. And one of their big concerns was we can't go down. We have to be up 100% of the time because they informed me they make $51 million a day. So you can imagine if they don't have access to their gaming floor, how much money they're losing if they're not able to produce.
Right. Talking millions an hour.
Exactly. So that's where we start breaking things up into workloads, right? What is mission critical? Another example, a business critical. If I lose a particular lines of business, what is that impact to my business? So again, it might not be a mission critical, but you have certain lines of business that are impacted. So that is a business critical workload. And then we'll move into more things like general purpose workloads, secondary workloads. And in today's world, obviously, we're digging more into this big data, AI type workloads. And what does that mean from an HPC perspective? And Vic, you guys have a lot of experience around like things like Hadoop and stuff.
Absolutely. I do a lot of work with Hadoop and AI analytics, primarily in the pharmaceutical and healthcare arena as well. And to Mike's point earlier, these environments are not getting any easier to manage or any less complex. If anything, the complexity is sprawling at an unbelievable rate. So anything we can do to shave off any complexity, any overhead, or make us faster to market. Because, at the end of the day, that's what big data AI is all about, is speed to market. Who can crunch the numbers faster and get those results out to their customers or end units as fast as possible.
Yep. And a lot of part, as we've been talking the whole time about this, what also defines that intelligent data storage is having the intelligent platform, the global intelligent engines to be able to monitor and predict what's happening inside your environment. So the nice part is, and I think Vic said earlier, this is probably one of the greatest storage portfolios that HPE's had. I know in the 8 years that I've been here, I feel more confident and comfortable today to be able to position the right storage product to solve those solutions that we're just talking about, right? Understanding what our customers need from a workload perspective. We could start from the low end of something like an MSA, which is more cost effective, more of a general purpose, affordable product, and scale everything up through our new Primera box, which gives us that mission critical 100% guaranteed uptime. So I know, again, depending on what our customers' requirements are, finding the right product to fit that solution. Now, the good part is, as I said before, we know we don't have all the products. So that's where we start filling in some of the gaps with a lot of our key partners. So for an example, like in the fiber channel world, we have a great relationship with Brocade, or now Broadcom, for fiber channel switches. We've also have some backings with Cisco now with the MDS fiber channel switches. And one of the big things you'll see within HPE is we're trying to allow for our customers to have choice, right? We don't want to build a world where you have to buy a product. We want to provide opportunity for choice for our customers. A good example of that as well is in that HCI space, going back to 2019, we opened up a great relationship with Nutanix, right? And we have a DX platform. And now we're always going to lead with our IP first, right? So SimpliVity, our DHCI platform, we're going to lead with that. But again, we know that there's a lot of customers out there that want choice. So we've taken that and opened up that opportunity with Nutanix and now provide on this DX platform. So now our customers have a choice to buy Nutanix running on HPE hardware and have a supported model.
One of the things with the HPE portfolio, along with the partnership and the complete program, which is basically a program where HPE has invested money in what they believe to be up-and-coming technologies such as Cohesity, Datera, Hedvig, and a few others out there. But it really is all about choice. And it's no longer taking a widget and ramming it into a solution. It really is more about understanding the workload, what the business unit or the company is trying to achieve, and then backing in the correct solution. And that really does make for a better outcome for everyone involved.
The nice part is through these relationships that we have with these partners, we're actually building these, if you want to call it reference architectures, where we know how something like, as you were saying, like a Datera in a software-defined primary storage world, how that fits together. Or an example, what I'm doing with that solution for the casino is they have a current solution that they're running on today that's not HPE, but they're looking at purchasing an all HPE solution, server, storage, backups, and they want to be able to move data between their current site and their two new sites. So part of that solution is for the backups, we're introducing our StoreOne's backup appliance, along with Veeam, as Veeam's going to do the backup as their ISV provider. And then in order to move data from site to site, since we have a disparate storage, we're actually going to use another partner, Zerto. So Zerto is going to give us that zero downtime type conversation to be able to replicate their disaggregated storage from one site to the other. So as Vic said, it's having these great relationships and partnerships that allow us to fill in the pieces that we need, but again, sell this as a total solution. Now, one of the things we've been talking about a long time today is InfoSight, right? And what is InfoSight, and what does that mean to our customers, and what does that mean to us internally, right? So, we've taken this AI intelligence from the Nimble platform. And again, when Nimble developed this back almost over a decade ago, one of their main goals was how do we help or eliminate support issues or support calls? So what they realized, if we use things like AI, we're going to collect all this rich telemetry data. So as Vic was saying, we're taking advantage of others, feeding all this data into a SaaS-based database. We're collecting probably millions of sensors every second, and we're looking for anomalies. So we basically are building baselines on our customers to understand this is what it should normally look like. If something is an anomaly, what do we do? And that's the difference of what InfoSight brings to the table.
And more importantly, InfoSight is also getting a lot more granular than that by taking a look at that telemetry data and then marrying it up to what type of application is that actually reporting on. Is it Exchange data? Is it SQL? Is it Oracle? Is it NoSQL? And then being able to, dive down at that layer and that granular layer really gives the engineers much better insight to the supportability, the reliability, and the usability of the products.
One of the things that I was really impressed with 3 years ago when we purchased Nimble and got InfoSight was 86% of the issues are automatically resolved. It automatically opens it, resolves the case, closes the case. But more importantly, over 54% of those issues are non-storage related. So that's been, and that's held pretty true across some of the other platforms, as Vic had said earlier, like 3PAR. We've also taken that across our whole entire server portfolio, across our HCI portfolio, our DHCI portfolios. And what we're seeing is, if we're monitoring or just looking at storage, that's only one piece of the puzzle. Now, some examples I've seen is there was a customer who had a competitor's array. They had opened a case with the competitor. It had been going on for months. They decided that it was during a refresh, they were looking at Nimble. So they moved their data onto the Nimble array. And within a couple hours, we were able to identify what the problem was that the other vendor hadn't been able to resolve for several months. Because the nice part of InfoSight AI is we're looking at the entire stack from the app, as Vic said, from the apps through the virtual machines, through the servers, through the networking, and the storage stack. We're not just looking at the storage stack only. So it's allowed us to be able to identify where in this entire stack or what point in the stack is causing the issues. And we're able to share that data. And some of the things Vic talked about, and we'll get in a little deeper, is what do you do with that once you learn, right? It's like, again, like that tip of the iceberg. We're not just creating these nice dashboards or advanced visualization. It's everything below the water. Things like blacklisting and the machine learning we talked about, and case automation, global learning, inoculating the base. These are some of the bigger things that are more important to our customers. And, if you remember the old rule, 70% of your time is spent maintaining your environment and 30% is automating. What we've seen with AI Ops through InfoSight is allowing us to flip that paradigm, giving our customers the capability to be more automative, not spending so much time maintaining their current environments. And that's what's allowing them to be more competitive in this new digital transformation world.
Plus, it gives those generalists a lot more time back in their day-to-day.
True. And that's a big part of what we're seeing here, right? Probably about 20% of the problems are easily fixed. 80% of the problems are really complex. So what we're seeing is through automation and through AI Ops, we're able to identify and fix those more complicated issues a lot easier for our customers. Issues that can't be resolved through AI, so if we haven't seen them before, then become what a level 3 case inside of our world, right? So we go directly in a Nimble world right to a level 3 engineer. Average response time is less than a minute. Average resolution time is less than 45 minutes. So we've eliminated pretty much all level 1, level 2 cases, and everything goes right to a level 3 guy. Average resolution, less than 45 minutes.
Makes a lot of sense, and it feels like it would also standardize and work the workflow for the engineer who is working on a case. You get the information back from the system. It's in a format that you're very well used to. You apply it to this global knowledge that InfoSight offers you, and you have a very narrow range of what could potentially be the problem and a very wide range of what could be the solution.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I remember 10 years ago being a storage admin, and, if there was a severe problem that I'd be working on, had to go through level 1 support. It was gather logs, ship them the logs. Are you updating? Are your drivers up to date? No, go update your drivers. Come back, talk to level 1 again, resubmit the logs with the new drivers. And it was a very tedious process that in some cases could take up to days, maybe even weeks to resolve.
Right. And so to Vic's point, right, one of the nice pieces of InfoSight, and I was actually doing a demo yesterday for a customer and showing them the whole InfoSight stack. And the nice part, as we're going through this, we started delving into the hardware side and then obviously the hypervisor side. What we're able to do from an InfoSight perspective on the hypervisor side, for example, we have cross-stack analytics, right? So we're feeding the VMware data into our InfoSight products. We're looking at that. And then what we're able to do is identify where the potential bottlenecks are. So an example of that is I had a customer who had a VM that was running pretty slow. Now, to Vic's point, in the old days, you would go in, you would look at kind of the average latency on your array, right? Because it's usually every minute you'll get back a report and say, my average latency is sub 1 millisecond or 2 milliseconds. And then from there, you would usually punt it over to the network guy, and he would see to make sure the ports are running nice. And then eventually it would go to the server guy, and eventually you'd get to the app guy, and you would start all over because you probably didn't find the resolution. So this was an ongoing process. What we've been able to do with InfoSight is we're looking, again, at the entire stack. We're looking at the host. We're looking at the network. We're looking at the hypervisor. What we're able to do real world is, and I was showing this to the customer yesterday, if a customer has a potential problem on a VM, you can drill into the VM with the cross-stack analytics, pinpoint the time of that issue, and you can literally draw it down to that seconds, and you can look at that exact time what's causing that latency on that VM. And what it shows is the host, the network, the hypervisor. And I was showing the customer in this example, the host attributed 200 milliseconds of latency. Now, it showed us that the host was oversubscribed. They didn't have enough memory and CPU and everything else. And as they clicked on it, the recommendation from InfoSight said, if you move this VM to another host, you'll eliminate your problem. They did that. They storage vMotion the VM from host 1 to host 2. All of a sudden, latency dropped down to sub 1 millisecond. So that's the power of what InfoSight brings. Not just alerting you there's a problem, but allowing you to troubleshoot the problem and then giving you a resolution how to fix the problem. So what we're driving towards with this vision of InfoSight is a true autonomous data center. And when we look at that, there's kind of 3 things I look at. Something that's obviously self-healing. It's able to free up your day, right? So as Chris was saying earlier, if we can give you time back in your day, become more productive, that's kind of a huge part of this. Obviously, something that's self-healing, we've been talking about the whole time. Something that not just predictive, but also prevents the problem, right? Before it becomes a bigger issue, this is automatically resolving those issues end to end. And then it's something that becomes more self-optimizing, right? Looking at things like resources and everything else, balancing your environment. And this is what we're kind of looking at in today's world is how do we take that infrastructure stack, realize this vision of true AI with InfoSight, and then help you guys continue down this journey for, decades to come.
Last June, I think it was, the one of the products that came out that kind of brought all these ideas together was Primera. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so one of the reasons that we spent such a long time going over sort of the genesis of where HPE has come from, as well as InfoSight, is Primera is, a lot of people look at it and go, oh, well, it's just the next generation of 3PAR. Technically, they're sort of right, but
it came after.
Because it came after. But if you really take a look at what Primera is, it's the culmination of InfoSight, 3PAR, and Nimble. So if you were to take a look at that Venn diagram, Primera is right smack dab in the middle. So they took the enterprise performance, reliability, and feature set of 3PAR, and they took the ease of manageability of Nimble and the AI ops ability of InfoSight and put that all into a single package called Primera. Now, Primera does have a lot of new changes under the covers, which we sort of alluded to earlier in terms of the hardware configuration as well. But really, that's where Primera came from. That's its DNA.
Yeah, and to that point, we obviously learned a lot from the different products. As Vic said, it's kind of a combination of learning from all these other products, combining this together. And we realized that we did need that high-level mission critical, right? I talked about there are some vectors or sectors, I should say, that are more impacted that want this 7 nines of availability, like the healthcares, like the financials of the world. And we realized that was an area that we needed to address. And again, SSD has masked a lot of the problems, but it hasn't fixed everything. And that's why we knew putting out this Primera platform was going to allow us to provide that high level of mission critical services that our customers needed to help us into this next decade.
Well, and the one thing that is really unique about the Primera array, and this is the first time I've ever seen this in 22 many years of being in this industry. But this is the first array that comes with a 100% uptime guarantee. When I first heard about that, I was a little skeptical. Anyone who says 100%, usually the bad ears go up, and you're like, well, what are the details around that? Do I have to jump through all these really strenuous hoops, or what are the details? What's the fine print? And really, the fine print on this is if you have InfoSight enabled, if you have a valid support contract, and you are up to the latest code on the array, you're in the program. That's it.
And that's true, right? As Vic said, that's pretty uncommon today. There's usually a lot of pre-requirements that you have to certify on your product prior to all of that happening. That's one of the good things we've done where that's not the case. We don't have all these prerequisites that you have to have, and you can at any time be qualified for this 100% availability uptime. And another good thing is in an enterprise level or mission critical level, we've also pushed that timeless conversation we were talking about earlier. So everything as a service, we're able to upgrade without forklift upgrading the product. So when the next gen or the next release of product comes out, you're easily able to upgrade to that next platform. So that has been pushed across our entire HPE portfolio from Primera through 3PAR, through Nimble in a timeless conversation, allowing you to maintain your investments. Because what we're seeing today, like we talked about earlier, the days of 3 years refreshing have passed us by. Customers are maintaining gear for 7 years nowadays. They're looking for a 7-year ROI. So we're looking at ways of how do we make that more palatable for customers. They don't have the time or the money to be replacing things on a every 3-year type basis anymore.
So if all you have to do is replace the controller heads and your data stays in place, it makes migrations exceptionally easy, exceptionally quick. So these data in place upgrades are sort of table stakes now going forward.
So one of the other big parts you'll hear that HPE, we renamed our program probably about a year or two ago from flex capacity into what's called GreenLake, right? So one of the big parts or one of the big positionings of GreenLake is consumption-based models. And we realize, the old days of CapEx expenditure, not that that's not a valid solution, right? Pay for it now. I know a lot of people depreciate usually their capital expenditures across that 5 years. But in order to get to this more cloud-like experience, we realize that you need a program that fits into a flexible capital expenditure. And what we've done with that is kind of a pay-as-you-go or pay-as-you-grow model. So what GreenLake allows us to do is provide our customers with financial agreements or service agreements that as they grow on a fixed structure year over year, they pay a fixed amount on a monthly subscription, or we monitor their environments and pay as they go. So you might be using, for example, 100 terabytes today. Next year, you might be using 110 terabytes. The nice part is we'll put additional gear on your floor at our cost, but allowing you to grow into that space without having to prepay for that storage up front.
That sounds an awful lot like cloud.
Exactly. And it's as a service capability, right? Because that's what I was saying earlier. Either you migrate to the cloud or you act as a cloud, right? And these are the models not only providing you with the hardware, but providing you with the vehicle and mechanisms to act like a cloud from a consumption base.
Right, and it also gives you a little bit more cost certainty. So when you're going from 100 terabytes to 110, you're paying for 10 additional instead of the old school way where you have to buy a whole new rack or, God forbid, a whole new SAN, which could be 10 times the cost just to get that 10 terabytes.
Yeah, if not 100 times the cost.
Yeah, and the good part, it does differentiate because, there are leasing models out there, like leasing a car, and at the end you would have either a $1 buyout or you can buy out the gear. This allows you to have a lifecycle management as well, right? Because the gear is owned by us. Obviously, you're paying a subscription-based model. We're responsible for providing you the new gear. The cost maintains the same, and we help you do the migration. The cost is on us.
And the procurement vehicle is much different than a lease as well. This is all done on a statement of work as the initial procurement vehicle, and any new hardware that's brought in, whether it be refresh, expansion, whatever, is just done through a simple change order referencing that master statement of work. So it makes procuring the gear that much easier. It's not a whole new procurement cycle every time you want to put gear on the floor.
And that's a great point, right? We help you avoid those long procurement cycles, as I was talking about earlier, right? We don't have weeks or months nowadays because your lines of business are going to go out to a public cloud and spin up, these shadow IT environments if you do. Another good part of that, too, is, like I was saying, you can help avoid some of that large capital expenditures, right? So that's what we've seen with companies like Airbnb and Uber and all these other companies. They didn't have to have a large capital expenditure up front because they did a monthly subscription-based model where they could spin up in the cloud and use, services around them. So that helped them avoid these huge outlays of money up front. And it helps you kind of grow and stay ahead of oncoming projects, right? So, as new demand becomes available, you're ahead of that curve. One example is I had a customer, probably about a year ago almost. They were looking at purchasing 2 arrays and they wanted 400 terabytes because they were planning for, a 2 or 3 year growth out. And at the time, they were only consuming about 240 terabytes. So they were literally overbuying by 160 plus terabytes. Now, some of the downfalls of that become is, one, their support contract starts on day one for that additional gear that they're putting on their floor, right? So they would have been paying support for that gear. 2, prices usually tend to go down on equipment as newer equipment comes out. So they would have been paying a premium for those drives up front. 3, it was a capital outlay, so they would have been buying that whole entire, purchase from the beginning. So we laid out a GreenLake offering to them saying, yeah, we'll start at 240 terabytes, what you're consuming today. We're going to put in a little bit of buffer, 20%, to give you room to grow. And over a 5-year span or 3-year span, we'll allow you to grow to that 400 terabytes. So we set a step structure of whatever it was, 50 terabytes a year. And they were able to pay the cost today, saving them. I think theirs ended up, they saved probably a couple $1,000s a month by doing it through a GreenLake offering instead of putting out a capital expenditure, paying for all that gear up front and paying support that would be, lost in the end.
Right. You're paying support on terabytes you're not potentially ever going to use.
Correct.
Just to make sure you have them if you need them.
Correct.
All right. I think we're coming up to the end of our time here. Vic, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I mean, it's just, Primera sort of fits into all of the models and technologies that we were talking about earlier, and really is the next evolution that has been purpose-built and designed with NVMe in mind, and true NVMe protocol, NVMe over Fabric, that type of stuff. And also integrating, leading edge technologies such as InfoSight. The other thing that's really exciting about this, again, as we just discussed, is how HPE is starting to reimagine how IT is consumed and purchased. It really is allowing some of the SMB players and some of the IT departments that are having their budgets slashed on a yearly basis still maintain and grow and keep ahead of that technology curve by leveraging unique vehicles such as GreenLake.
Right. Mike?
Yeah, and all great points, Vic. When we started down this journey years ago, and Antonio and Meg's vision back then, our CEO and current CEO, they realized that the world was becoming more digital, right? And we needed to be able to help customers transition into this new ideal economy. So we were looking at ways, and as you said, vehicles to help our customers transition. And we knew the edge was a huge part of this. And then again, having the right products, the right mix of products to allow our customers to meet these changing demands. There had to be a shift in the way the market was being addressed. And, thank the Lord, we've kept ahead of that. And as you said earlier, and I think I echoed, was this is probably the best portfolio and best offerings HPE's had in a long time. So, again, we're not going down this journey by yourself. You have a lot of industry backing behind what we're doing. We understand the next evolution of IT. We're putting this to take us out through the next decade with products like Synergy, with products like Primera, with our HCI solutions, and obviously wrapping the services and consumption models around that to allow you to deliver on things as a service and allow you to be ahead of the curve, not behind the curve.